So welcome to Johnny Masters Academy. Today I'm going to talk about federalism, right? The powers of the federal government versus the state government. And be prepared for my hemp lectures, which are coming up. This is all in the Freedom School. But so some background, right? So federalism, dualism. We live in America, United States of America. You have 13 original colonies. They all banded together to form one government, but they each had their own exclusive governments. The Articles of Confederation wasn't strong enough. They got stronger central government, and hence we got the U.S. Constitution. So we call it a federalism because it's a dualistic government. It's dualism. It's you have the states who have power, and then you got the federal government who's got power, and then the local governments which have no power except for the power which the state governments give to them. And I'm going to break it down, okay? So I'm going to break it down. The Ronnie Lee Smith, Gatewood Galbraith, Denny Payman, the sheriff of Jackson County, all these folks have pointed out that the sheriff is the most powerful position, which they are correct about when it comes to in the county government. So, okay, so federalism. We got a federal system. It's just like the Iroquois Confederacy, right? They had the Onondaga and the Tuscarora and all like different 5 or 6 different nations, all in one confederacy, all in one group, right? So you have lots of individual governments, but then you got in the federal government. The federal government has certain powers, and the state government has certain powers. What are those powers? I'm going to tell you. So James Madison Federalist number 51, he says the power surrendered by the people would be divided between 2 distinct governments, which creates a balance of power that would enable the different governments to control each other. So that's part of the balance of powers, right? So we have judicial, legislative, and executive branch, right? Those are the 3 branches of government. Well, we also have more checks and balances. It's not just the powers that are separated, but it's also the governments themselves. So we have a federal government, we have state governments. And state governments control those areas which aren't exclusively under federal control. There's the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment says all the other powers are given to the states. So 95% of criminal court cases are handled by the states themselves. So state governments control a lot of things. 95% of criminal court cases are handled by the states themselves. So they're the ones that handle the crime. State politics are in charge of the general welfare, safety, and the health of their citizens. So any place where the federal government doesn't have power, that's where the state government takes over. Now there's been a different, the balance of power has shifted towards the federal government, especially since the New Deal. The balance of power has shifted decisively in favor of federal politics. Expansion of administrative agencies and other federal programs have encroached on state sovereignty, often with little or no resistance from the states themselves. So Obamacare is a good example. That's the health of the people, right? So that would be delegated properly to the states, but they've been able to expand the implied powers. And the federal government also protects our health too. So it's sort of a concurrent power, but it's the point being is that there's been several states that have actually denied Obamacare. We're not going to use Obamacare for our citizens. We're going to let our poor citizens who have no health insurance just die off in the ditch. Who gives a shit about them? Which I think they should be culpable for murdering their own citizens, right? If they allow their own citizens to die, they don't give a shit about their own citizens. But they're allowed to opt out, and that's what they're doing. They're opting out. But say take Kentucky. Kentucky bought into it and bought as much as they can because it's going to help us. So there is no resistance from the state of Kentucky for Obamacare. Now you got Mitch McConnell, right, and Rand Paul, who absolutely fucking hate it. The senators are fighting it, but the state power, they have no power when it comes to the state. They only have 1 vote in the Senate, right, or 2 votes in the Senate, so that they only have a very little bit of power. They can introduce bills and try to get laws passed, but when it comes to state power, our state senators have absolutely nothing to do with it. All that falls under the governor and the 138 representatives. There's 100 House of Representatives, 38 senators, and that's Frankfurt. Okay, so the U.S. Constitution, it defines and limits the power of national government. It defines the relationship between the national government and the individual state governments, and also guarantees the rights of U.S. citizens. So the Bill of Rights, right? We've got 26 Bill of Rights. For example, the United States has one common currency. We use pennies, nickels, dollars, 20 bucks, $100, and that's used for between Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, California, everywhere. So the entire 50 states has one common currency, but the death penalty is something that's left up to the states. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of powers here. I'm going to kind of go back and forth. It's probably going to take several videos, but it's important stuff because let's see. Let's start out with the different types of power. So the federal government has expressed powers. That means that's the powers that they say they specifically have. For instance, they have, not only to coin money but also to set up the postal services, right? That's the federal government is going to set up the postal services. So your post offices, that's federal government, okay? And Elizabeth Warren is actually trying to get the post office to where they can actually do financial dealings, so people aren't dependent upon banks in order to just deal with their checking accounts and sort of their regular transactions, but they actually want to make the post offices more, have more services for the people instead of just, it's a dying breed. And I remember in Glencoe, right, they're listening to Rush Limbaugh, so they're not trying to expand their services. They're basically comfortable taking all the money and the tax dollars from us just to, give out a few letters. But the post office used to be sort of like the courthouse. That's where the courthouse and the business, that's how you send mail out, right? Okay, so there's express powers. Those are the powers that the government says we specifically have these powers. Then there's implied powers, which is sort of based on an elastic clause, and it's saying that they're necessary and proper for carrying out the express powers. So in order to, for example, in 1791, Federalists in Congress argued that the creation of a national bank was necessary and proper for Congress to execute its enumerated powers to coin and borrow money and regulate currency. So since they had the express powers, the federal government has the express powers to collect taxes, coin money, regulate currency, and borrow money. Since they have all those powers, then they said that in order to enforce those powers, then the government needs a national bank. McCulloch v. Maryland, 1819, confirmed Congress's right to establish a national bank. So you got the express powers, you got implied powers, and then you got denied powers, and then you got concurrent powers. So the implied powers are just, they are not specifically mentioned, but in order to enforce the express powers, you have to have the implied powers. It's sort of an expansion of the federal government power, so you got to be, implied powers, you got to be skeptical of any of those. Then there's the concurrent powers, means that both state and the federal government have those powers. And then you got denied powers, which means neither the state nor the federal government can impede upon those powers. Okay, and actually I want to read the sections, while I'm going through this, so that's why it's going to take a little bit more time. But I think it's important because I'm documenting all this. This is the difference between who has, what entity has what power. The feds have the DEA and the IRS and have all these alphabet agencies which can come into our counties and, sort of make their own rules, the FBI, CIA, and do whatever they want to do, but are they allowed to? And I think that's why we need to know what our powers are as citizens. So, okay, let's get to this. The U.S. Constitution dictates how each of the states are allowed to interact with one another. So Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, actually we got like 7 adjacent states. We're the second highest one, state with the most adjacent states. Tennessee is number 1. They got more states that's actually right next to them compared to Kentucky, which has got 7. But all of the states that's surrounding us, we have to do certain things, okay? That's constituted, that's written in the Constitution. So one of those things, the state-to-state relations, is called the Full Faith and Credit Clause. So the Full Faith and Credit Clause, it comes from Article 4, Section 1, and it says that each state must honor other states' public acts and records. So if I get married in Kentucky, then that marriage is recognized in Ohio. If I get a driver's license in Kentucky, that is a power that is recognized in Tennessee. So they must honor other states' public acts and records. So public acts and records. So if I'm married, if I have a hunter's license, well, I don't know, I guess, well, there's a lot of wiggle room for all these too. You'll come to find out. But let's just see what Article 4, Section 1 is, because it's the full faith and credit, right? Full faith and credit. There's a Wikipedia article here, and it's got the entire one, but they actually got full faith and credit clause, so we can really get into it, right? So Article 4, Section 1 of the United States Constitution, known as the full faith and credit clause, addresses the duties that states within the United States have to respect the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. So not just the public acts and records, but also judicial proceedings. According to the Supreme Court, there's a difference between the credit owed to laws, legislative measures, and common laws compared to the credit owed to judgments. Judgments are generally entitled to greater respect than laws in other states. At present, it's widely agreed that this clause of the Constitution has got little impact on the court's choice of law decision, although this clause of the Constitution was once interpreted differently. The actual text of it is, full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state, and Congress may, by general laws, prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect therein. So we can go on, and there's a whole bunch of stuff actually that goes along with that, but that's full faith and credit. There's the so each state must honor each of the public acts, the records, and the judicial proceedings. Privileges and immunities. Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1, it says that a citizen of one state is a citizen of every state, and therefore is entitled to all the privileges and immunities of those states. Okay, so that's important to understand. So the privileges and immunities of it. If you are a citizen, this brings up actually the gay marriage law. So some people, so Kentucky, somebody gets married in Massachusetts, which legalizes gay marriage, and they come to Kentucky. In fact, that's actually the full faith and credit clause too, right? They must respect other states' public records and public acts. So if you're married in Massachusetts, then you should be recognized in Kentucky. But like I said, there's some debate with that. The privileges and immunities clause. That is, I probably could just type in privileges and immunities clause, and again, Wikipedia pops right up at the very top one. And what Wikipedia talks about is it's also called the comity clause, C-O-M-I-T-Y, comity. It provides a state from treating citizens of other states in a discriminatory manner. Additionally, the right of interstate travel may plausibly be inferred from the clause. So privileges and immunities, you're allowed to travel to and from. Kentucky specifically, the Constitution, we got the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution, but we also have a Bill of Rights of the Kentucky Constitution, and specifically Kentucky allows you to leave the state if you want to. You're not allowed to, they don't have a right to trap you in the state. You have a right to leave the state if you want to, which is good. If you want to leave America, if you want to go to Mexico or Canada, you'd have to get a passport, which isn't that big of a trouble, but at least I don't have to do that for Kentucky. I could drive right across the state lines, no problem, show no passport or no information to anybody. The sentence of the Constitution of this clause is, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in several states. So that's pretty clear. That's the privileges and immunities clause. So there's that. That's another thing that the state has to recognize with other states. Now another one, this one's pretty, I don't want to say controversial, but okay, so Article 4, Section 2, Clause 2, it says anyone who is charged with a crime in one state and escapes to another state must be returned to the state where the crime was committed. So Ronnie Lee Smith, just to use him as an example, he had been convicted of 4 felonies, right, for trying to rescue his cousin in Boone County. So Boone County went ahead and gave him 4 felonies. He didn't murder nobody or rape anybody, but they did convict him of all these, felonies, all these charges. And then he was arrested in Arizona, and they wanted to try him in Arizona. Well, they wanted to starve and kill him in the jail, right, and let his leukemia come back up. But after they had put whatever charges on him that they wanted to in Arizona, they was going to ship him back to Kentucky. And then they would have that's sort of the state-to-state relations. Now, this is interesting because I remember there was maybe what saves you from the inefficiency of the bureaucracy, or what saves you from the bureaucracy is its inefficiency. But I knew a lot of folks that would either get some sort of misdemeanor or some trouble, older folks that had told me about this, but they would get in trouble in Kentucky, then they would flee on over to Indiana. In fact, William Justice Goebel, our governor who got murdered in 1900, William S. Taylor, runs over to Indiana and never was tried for that crime. So, you know, sometimes people can get away with it, but according to the Constitution, if you commit a crime in one state, then the other state has to extradite you to that state. So that's according to the Constitution, right, of the United States of America.